Hi, this is your host, Lori Moilov with the Limitless podcast, and we are on season 3. And I'm so excited to have our first guest of season 3, Nyeesha D. Williams. She's a mental health expert, and she comes from an amazing path. Nyeesha, I was wondering if you could kind of dig a little bit into your past and how, like, I guess I discovered you through Finesse Media. So I got to give a shout out to Alexi and check out Finesse Media. But how did you get into mental health and finding that that was a great catalyst for you in finding joy and helping others?
Oh man. Well, I want to first say thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, no problem.
Mental health, how did I get in? They say individuals that go in and major in psychology, they're really going in to diagnose themselves. So I kind of
Mhm.
think that's really my answer. I've always had a medical background. My first job at the age of 14, I had a summer job working at the hospital and I just kept that going. I was in a work study program in high school where I was only in school for 3 periods. And then because of my grades, I can go out and work. Became a medical assistant, worked my way up for it as an LPN. So I was always in the medical world. And I got this job at a hospital in fertility and reproductive medicine and science, where we worked closely with women and young girls dealing with reproductive medicine, right? What's going on, whether they were diagnosed with an illness, trying to conceive, and I gravitated to them because I had a loss of my own and the mental well-being of these women, right? I don't think that we were focusing on that enough. It was more so like, how is your body responding to this medication? You either conceive, you didn't conceive, but what happens next? And I wanted to make sure that I created something or I gain more knowledge to fill that institutional void. How can I show up for you, mind, body, and spirit? And I kind of changed my major from psychology to from biology to psychology, excuse me. And then I didn't stop. It was just, I loved what I was doing. I moved from the inner city of Newark, New Jersey to LA. I was working at an infertility place in Beverly Hills. I was getting paid the most money in the world, but I was unhappy. Especially as a creative, I found that I was just doing, 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 but not creating where my heartstring was. And I knew that I can create something for women creatives where they can continue to show up, but I can guide them right to their mental well being so we can all feel that sense of abundance. And here we are now.
Yeah. It's so beautiful. Like,
Thank you.
just and with that transition, because I know, like, a lot of folks, like, that are creative, we're constantly creating, but sometimes we get these lulls, or enter a dark period. I
Right.
guess, what's some advice that you can give some of our fellow creatives that maybe are in a darker period of their creativity or not, inspired yet?
That's a really good question. So I want to take you back really quickly to how I got back.
Yeah.
Um, in addition to working in medicine, I've always been a creative. I was the plum fairy and the nutcracker. I danced with Avenelli and Ebony Dance Theater. So I always traveled performing, and life began to life. And I knew that I had to, pay bills, right? So
Mhm.
I kind of separated myself from creativity from that performing aspect and then just focus on my day-to-day job to the point where I could not do anything else but focus on creating. I was so
Mm.
unhappy. I quit my job. I went home like, I don't know what I just did. I don't know why I did it. I just know that I was not happy. And I wanted to start focusing on what allowed me to breathe, what gave
Mm.
me the freedom, what helped me become my most authentic self. I went home, I wrote a book in 2 weeks, I published a book, and I've been on a roll since, working on something that I actually gave my blood, sweat, and tears to. So if I had to give some advice to some creatives who may find themselves in a dark period, one, provide yourself with grace while you're there. We
Mm.
all get there, right? We all have that experience. Love yourself like you are the adult loving the younger version of you. right? I'm so big on inner
Mhm.
child healing. And
Yeah.
know that everyone has its time. You're rushing yourself for what? Right?
Mhm.
Comparing yourself to whom? Why? Your experience is not their experience, but as long as you focus on your experience, you'll get exactly what you need.
Wow,
So that would be my advice.
you dropped some gems right there. That's so true of just, like, being your authentic self and
Right.
yeah, wow, and definitely the inner child healing because I think a lot of us have, life
Mhm,
experiences and traumas
mhm.
and some of that actually I know you have a saying of, like, even on your site, you have a saying about, sometimes the bad things can have a positive impact and
Yes.
can have this ripple effect, so even with you sharing your story of, like, you weren't happy, and
Right.
then you took that time to flourish in a way and plant that seed and
Mhm,
write that beautiful book that
mhm.
I mean, now I know a lot of people reach out to you about your experience and having that courage to, actually take the leap because I think
Right.
sometimes as creatives we're, nervous like okay, I maybe, you're drawing a sketch and you're afraid to share your art. I think it's so important for us to as creatives keep sharing with each other cuz we inspire each other. We bounce off each other.
Right. Right. It's so important. I honestly, when I wrote my first book, I did not intend to share it with anyone, like to share it with the world. I did it
Mm,
because I needed to unpack. I did it
mhm,
because there was a heavy weight on my shoulders. I did it because I needed to release, right? And if we want to be our best selves, we have to let it go, right? We have to create so we will not hold on to the heavyweight. So if you are a painter, if you are a singer, if you are a dancer, let it let it move you, right? Let it
mhm,
work through your body. That is therapy. So I just went in my room and I wrote and I unpacked and I dealt with my skeletons and I created, I became a wordsmith, as some people say, because I wanted change. And I am a firm believer in being the change that you want to see. So, how can your strokes on a canvas change you? How can that make you feel better? And when people see that, of course they're going to connect because you've created from the root, the essence of beauty, of freedom, right?
mhm.
And it sounds so cliche and many people say it, but not many believe it. But if one person sees you, if one person hears you, if one person understands you, you have created an impact.
Yeah. So true. It's you never know that one person that you can
Hmm.
impact with whether it's, a poet like a poet, sharing their
Hmm.
poetry
Hmm.
or just like your book, for example, you've
Right.
inspired so many women and you're continuing to do that work with your new project. Can you kind of delve into the creative process of how did that all start for you with your new I guess your new
Uh,
project, your new baby?
yes. So my new baby is When the Music Stops,
Mm.
WTMS, and that is something that I wanted to do for a very long time. Music is a part of my family's world in every way. My husband is a musician. We met in a performing arts high school. We both majored in music.
Mhm.
Being in this world, being in the entertainment world, I get to see so many different artists who shares themselves with the world, but when they stop sharing, they forget who they are, right? Because it's
Mhm.
so performative. And I wanted to create a safe space where artists can come and we can sit down and talk about what goes on in your life. When you're not on stage, when you're off stage,
Mm.
when the music stops, what happens with your mind, right? How do you deal with anxiety or depression or any of these elements that some people may think an artist does not experience, but we are all just humans, right?
Mm.
Navigating
Yeah.
life. And we have a lot in common. So it was important for me to choose some of these artists who many people look up to, right?
Mhm.
To form that
Yeah.
connectivity. I'm no different from you. You are no different from me. This is what I
Mhm.
experience, and these are the strategies and tactics I use to get me out of it. And maybe, just maybe, that will inspire someone outside of their song that they're singing, right? The words that they
Hmm.
say would be just as inspirational. And I absolutely love it. I've had so many different people that I sat down with and spoke to. And to be honest, the feedback that I receive, just hearing the words from these artists is what keep the fans moving. It's not the
Hmm.
soundtrack, right? It's
Yeah.
not their album. It's, hey, I cry too. I cry as well,
Hmm.
right? And I get sad sometimes. But similar to what I said in our
Hmm. 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 Yeah. It's so beautiful the work you're doing, and even in a past interview that I've seen you in, you stated that your one of your best ideas came to you while you were sitting in bed. I guess
yes.
where are some of your best ideas coming from? Where do you get them? Do you have a sacred space? Can you share kind of creating that sacred space for a creative?
Yes, so I have quite a few, right? I do have a space in my home where only I can be in.
Mhm.
I have my altars and vision boards and inspirations and all of the things, chimes and everything that makes me feel zen. But
Mm.
outside of my home, I connect to nature. I'm a really big, firm believer in going to hug a tree, grounding, walking, running, you know. I love aerial yoga, something that makes you meditate. And when we think of meditation, we think that we're supposed to just be still, quiet, and then focus. No, it's what brings you closer to freedom. And freedom meaning like where your mind goes, right? Where your body flows. And if I feel as if I am stagnated or I cannot create, I'll go out and I'll walk, right? To the point where I'm not really focusing on the creation by hand or vocal cords, but I'm focusing on, do you hear the sound of the car? Do you hear the birds chirping? Do you hear the wind? That then inspires me to go back, right? And say, oh, okay, I remember. Like, this is better. This sounds better. I should do this. Or maybe I should just provide myself with some grace. Right? Just
Yeah.
chill. And we all need that, especially as creatives, right? We pour ourselves. We pour so much. We give so much of ourselves, and finding these alternative therapeutic practices to give back to us is so important.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I agree. Like you're saying, like hug a tree, go outside.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of hiking, so going
Yes.
outside is just so necessary to kind of recharge your system.
Mhm,
That's kind of
mhm.
how I feel about it. But I know
Right.
like with creatives, like we go through different like cycles of emotions, because we're very tapped in, and sometimes it could be anxiety, just like you were saying with your blog and
Mhm.
dealing with anxiety or depression or any of those realms. Like what is some advice you have for some of our creatives? Maybe they're working on a song and they just have heavy anxiety or are depressed at the moment. What are some tips that you can suggest to them?
So one for sure is being present. When we think about
Mm.
anxiety, anxiety we find comes from being too focused on the past or being too focused on the future.
Mm.
That is why you're feeling the feels, right? But if you allow yourself to just be in the present moment and live there, and when you feel like, okay, I'm too focused on what the outcome is going to be, step away.
Mm.
Step away. I i have a lot of clients who are worried about like the crunch time, having to
Mm.
release a project. Is my second album going to be just as good as my first?
Mhm.
And when we get lost in the perception of others or how people will perceive us, then we lose the creative ability, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's so important for us to know that our magic is like no other magic. However, we need to create it is how we should create it. The moment that it becomes anything more than just creativity is no
Mhm.
longer magical,
Yeah.
right? When you have to worry about the algorithm, you got to worry about the likes, you got to worry about the sales, you are no longer creating. Take it,
Yeah.
compartmentalize it. Take it one step at a time. Let's focus on the magic. Then we can focus on the marketing or the business aspect of it. But trying to do all of that at the same time, you are going to hurt yourself.
Oh, yeah. I totally understand that one. Even for myself, I've been too into my head, whether it's, for the podcast or
Mhm.
musically. So, yeah, I totally get that. It's too much to, like, you're biting off too much that you can't get into
Right.
the creativity of it.
And I also think that it's important for us to be okay with feeling what we're feeling. If you find yourself feeling sadness, trying to avoid the feeling of sadness to run to another emotion that you feel is more positive is avoidance, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
the moment we choose to avoid, we will then see what we avoided seeping out on something else in our lives. So yeah, you may feel like, oh, okay, I won't deal with that, and it's no longer my reality. But it may
Mhm.
show up in your relationships. It may show up in your work ethic. It may show up in your weight or your health, right? So if
Mhm.
you feel sad, be in that. Be in that
Yeah.
emotion and feel it and work your way out of it when it's time. And the same goes for any other. We are living this fast-paced life, so we just want it to be done, 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 done. It's like, no, my love. Whatever it is, it's your body telling you to deal with it. So just deal with it. And that's
Yeah.
it.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I understand because sometimes I definitely try to avoid things, and
Right.
you're right, they seep in through other ways, and you're like, "Okay, yeah, I just shoulda,
Yep.
really accepted that emotion and carried it,"
Right.
and just like you were saying, a powerful word I kinda resonated with is give yourself grace. Yeah,
It's
because
so important. It's so
yeah.
important because I mean, you know who is really going to give it to you,
Mhm,
you know? And when the world sees you providing for yourself, which then in turn makes you glow. Not only are you going to inspire people to do it for themselves, but you're teaching people how to do it for you.
mhm. Yeah.
You provide yourself with grace, then others will follow, right? Instead of versus looking for other people to provide you the grace and you haven't even provided yourself with grace. It
Mm.
starts with us.
So
That's
true. Yeah. Oh my gosh. You've been dropping so many wisdom bombs on us. Like, I just love it. And I usually ask each of my guests, what this one word that connects them with creativity. What would you say your one word would be, Naisha?
my one word that connects with creativity would be freedom.
Mm,
Yeah, that's my one word.
yeah.
That's what I
Wow.
feel, what I see. That's what I know to be true when it comes to creating.
It's so true. Just being free, letting
Mhm.
letting it all, like, whatever it is, just let it free and let it out. Yeah. And
Right.
I also wanted to ask, because you're the catalyst for this for season 3, is there a piece of art or creativity or something that kind of inspires you? Something you go back to? It could be a book, a painting. What is that one piece of art? It could be a poem, a
I would say
song.
two different
Okay.
things. So one would be my second book, and that is a book on forgiveness, the 8 simple
Mm.
steps to get you towards forgiveness. And the reason why I go back to that is because when you navigate this world, forgiveness is such
Ooh.
an important act, right? And a
Yeah.
lot of times we tend to think that we forgave someone, but we just avoided. and didn't want to deal. So forgiveness,
Yeah.
what is so important, is we have to remember that it's a gift to us, not a gift to
Mm,
the other person, right? So when we
yeah.
actively forgive, then we can continue to live a life without as many burdens. He hurt me, she hurt me, they hurt me, I expect it. The expectations come after that, after the title of
Mm,
whatever, whoever the person is. So I would have to say I always go back to that book because sometimes I forget, right?
mm,
Sometimes I forget that this is an act that I should be truly believing in, radical forgiveness. And then my second book, which I feel like it should be a Bible, but it's Women Who Run with the Wolves
Ooh.
by Clarissa Pinkola. And it's several different stories compacted in this one thick, solid book. And it basically just teaches women or the feminine to live the most feminine that you can because there's so much power in that. And
Mm.
it took me maybe 2 years to read this book because it forced me to deal with myself.
Ooh, yeah.
And and every client or every person that I know, I always offer up this book because if you can be introspective and you can break down barriers and if you can break generational curses, you are powerful. And if you can do that, you can do anything. And that would be the book that I feel like allow me to see that I can do anything. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you so much, Naisha, for
Very
sharing all these
welcome.
amazing gems on the Limitless podcast. I know our listeners are gonna like really resonate with all the things you've shared today. Where can some of our listeners kind of find if they're interested in reading, the amazing blog you just started, When the Music Stops, or even tapping into some of your books? Where can they find you?
You can visit my website at nyeeshawilliams.com. That's N as in Nancy, YEESHA Williams. And I'm on every social platform as Nyeesha D. So that's NYEESHA D as in diva or divine.
Right. Thank you so much for being on the Limitless podcast. I learned so much today, and giving yourself grace and your word freedom, that's so powerful. And also the books you shared, especially forgiveness, that one, whoa, I can't wait. I'm gonna definitely get that. And I hope some of our listeners, tap in and get that too. I'll make sure to share your website. Thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Vibe with me on my frequency.